On today's episode, we're going to be talking about the Charlotte Hornets. The Charlotte Hornets were coming off a 19-63 record in 2024-25, a year with many injuries to their young core. In the offseason, they ended up drafting Knappel with the 4th pick, Liam McNeely with the 29th pick, Sion James with the 33rd pick, and Ryan Kalkbrenner with the 34th pick. This was widely seen as a very solid draft class with a combination of youth and experienced players. Their only re-signing was Trey Mann, but they brought in Pat Connaughton via trade, Mason Plumlee as a free agent, as well as Colin Sexton via trade. As for losses, they ended up losing Seth Curry in free agency, Daquan Jeffries was waived, Micic was traded, Nurkic was traded away, Okogie was waived, Nick Smith Jr. was waived, and they traded away Mark Williams to the Phoenix Suns. There was a lot of discussion around the idea that the Hornets were trying to build a culture under coach Charles Lee. This was because of the way they approached the draft and free agency, but it was yet to be determined if we would see any of that this season. Now, as we get into the season, it started off looking like another typical season for the Hornets. After their first 25 games, they only went 7-18. LaMelo Ball only appeared in 16 of those games, and there was also discussion about him and his place on this team due to his inconsistencies and health concerns. And Brandon Miller was still struggling with shoulder injuries. Only appeared in 9 of the first 25. The start of the year was honestly all about their young guys. Knappel came out of the gates scoring at an extremely efficient rate and was providing solid defensive presence, looked like an experienced NBA player from game 1 with the way he was performing. Additionally, Ryan Kalkbrenner was already looking like a premier rim protector in the league. This was also on top of his ability to provide trustworthy finishing as a lob threat and around the hoop. They looked like two incredible rookie additions early on. The first half of the year was definitely an improvement from the years that we've seen before. They were sitting at 24-28 at the deadline, very close to 500, and right in the playoff mix. LaMelo returned after missing those 10 games early on and ended up playing every single game for the rest of the season. This was after some lineup adjustments where they ended up bringing off the bench some games, starting some games. It honestly worked out. It wasn't really a minutes restriction, it was just kind of playing him in the games differently. But yeah, like I said, it ended up helping in the long term. He was able to stay healthy for the rest of the season. Miles Bridges was providing his typical stuff on both ends of the floor. Scoring numbers did take a hit with the emergence of Knappel, but still provided really good impact each game. The typical stuff you see from Miles Bridges, he'll space out and hit the 3-ball, he'll get to the hoop, he'll be a lob threat, he'll defend, he'll rebound. Just an all-around solid role player. Not a superstar player, but a role player for this team. The Hornets were a little bit active at the deadline. They ended up trading cash to the Magic for Tyus Jones, who was then rerouted to the Mavs in the AD trade, where they got Malachi Branham from the Wizards. He was eventually waived, but they also traded Mason Plumlee to the Thunder for Ousmane Dieng, who, as we all know, was rerouted to the Bulls with Colin Sexton and 2 second-round picks for Kobe White and Mike Conley, who was eventually waived. The Hornets brought in some young guard depth at the deadline to address a need that was bench scoring, a very exciting addition for this young, exciting team. The second half of the year for this team was the biggest story of their season. They ended up going 27-10 after January 22nd, and they were undoubtedly the hottest team in the league for the second half of the year. And during this time, all their young core players were looking incredible. LaMelo and Brandon Miller were staying healthy and played very, very well. Knappel continued his Rookie of the Year performance. Miles Bridges provided everything they asked him to do, and the new addition of Kobe White provided immediate scoring impact when he returned from their injury. They were looking like a complete team that complemented each other in all aspects of the game. They're finding each other open, hitting their threes at a very high clip. Their defensive pressure was really solid on that end of the floor. They were a really exciting team to watch. I was tuning in for a lot of games during this time because I wanted to see what they were doing, and I was not disappointed every time I turned that TV on. They looked like a brand new team compared to the Hornets we had seen in recent history, and had lots of people talking about how they could make some noise as a 7-8 seed in the playoffs. Some were calling them as an upset over teams like the Pistons, who were kind of struggling the second half of the year, and honestly it was a believable take at the time. The Hornets finished the year at 44-38, good for 9th in the East, and they ended up beating the Heat in the first play-in game, but ultimately lost to Orlando in the next one, which ended their season. I know a lot of people are excited for them to get to the playoffs and kind of show that young, exciting team that we've been seeing. But it was a year of growth, and I don't think they'll be very far off next year. I definitely think we could see this team in the playoffs next year. Some players that I haven't talked about yet, one being Moussa Diabate. His minutes did continue to go up this year, but he ended up splitting time with Ryan Kalkbrenner. He continues to prove himself game in and game out as a very active and athletic big with his ability to rebound very well and provide rim protection when it's needed. That's not to mention that he's a great lob threat. He can finish around the rim. He's just an exciting player that fits this exciting team. I like Moussa Diabate as a player a lot. Next guy who deserves way more praise than he's getting is Sion James. He played in all 82 games this year and provided ball handling defense off the bench. He honestly looked like a vet in his rookie season. I know they said about Con and Ryan Kalkbrenner, but the Hornets nailed all of their draft picks this year. I mean, Liam McNeely didn't play very much. He was in the G League for most of the season, but they nailed every single one of their draft picks this year. And Sion James, for some reason, doesn't get the praise that he should be. He's definitely going to be a core piece of this team's future with how he played this season. As we look ahead, the Hornets ended up sticking at pick 14 in the lottery, but that's also to go along with the pick they have late in the draft at number 18. I think they target front court depth with one of the picks and then go wing with the other, Whichever order that may be in, I'm not too sure. But for the front court depth, I think they target Merez Johnson Jr. I know they have two bigs that they like, but this is a guy that provide immediate impact on the floor. He looked incredible at the combine with his measurements and his testing, showing off an ability to shoot the three ball. And as everyone knows, he'll bring in a havoc-wreaking defensive effort. A very safe bet type of pick. He's established. He provided incredible impact all year, sharing minutes with Ademar at Michigan there. He helped them tremendously in their title run. Just a guy that will come in. I honestly think he'd be the starter from day one in Charlotte there. And as for the wing pick, I kind of like a guy like Dalen Swain. A little bit of a raw project type of player, but he does about everything but shoot, which the Hornets have a lot of on their current roster. They have a ton of guys that provide high clip shooting already, so they don't really need to go after a guy to bring in more. What Swain would bring in would be versatility on defense and surprisingly good playmaking for the type of player he is. He's known as a slashing type of player, but he can also find the open guy when he needs to. I think there's two things that would be tremendous help for the Hornets, especially with this new culture that they're trying to build. After taking a major step forward this season with reaching the play-in tournament, Charlotte's biggest question is whether they push their chips in now for a playoff run or remain patient and continue developing their young core. Kobe White's a restricted free agent, but Charlotte's expected to retain him, and there's very few teams with the cap space and roster fit to seriously pursue him. This makes the Hornets a clear favorite to bring him back, and Charlotte will likely need to pay somewhere between $72 to $88 million over 4 years to keep him. It would most likely be a front-loaded contract with a team option in the final year. This would kind of help the Hornets get that long-term financial flexibility, especially as the rest of the roster will become more expensive, and they will become more expensive with how great their young guys are looking. Even after they bring him back, which I believe they will do, the Hornets are projected to have significant room below the luxury tax and full access to the non-taxpayer mid-level exception, which gives them an opportunity to add veteran talent. I think they could go after a guy like John Collins. He might be too expensive, but I think he'd slide in pretty well there, especially if they get off Miles Bridges, what I'll talk about a little bit later. John Collins, I think, would slide in to this Hornets team and play a very solid role, kind of like what PJ Washington was doing a little bit before. He also would provide some veteran leadership to help them make the playoffs. Outside of all of that, Charlotte has assets to pursue a star if one becomes available. I know there's talks about them being a mystery team in the Giannis sweepstakes. I don't think it'd be something like that. But the Hornets control all of their future first-round picks. They own additional draft assets and have several large expiring contracts. If the management decides the team's ready to compete now, I think they do go all in on one of those stars that might become available in the trade market this offseason. When it comes to extensions, Brandon Miller is probably one of the most important decisions this summer. He has 100% established himself as a cornerstone piece. He averaged 20 points per game this year. And Charlotte's expected to begin negotiations on a long-term extension very soon. Probably going to be a deal worth roughly $140 million over 4 years. And I think that would make sense for both sides. They want to keep him around, and I believe he wants to be here as well. As for Miles Bridges, his future is a little bit less certain. Bridges is entering the final year of his contract and carries significant value as an expiring deal. I think what they should do is kind of evaluate how it's going with him as the season progresses and kind of play their cards at the deadline, possibly using him as a trade with his expiring contract. There's been a lot of talk about him getting traded in the past. I don't think he's a guy they really need to keep around, especially if they can go after and get a guy like John Collins, as I mentioned before. John Collins would slide in and do everything that Miles Bridges is already doing. I think he's an expendable player in this current core. Last but not least, we have the LaMelo Ball situation. I don't think he receives an extension this offseason. He still has multiple years in his contract, which allows Charlotte to kind of focus on their other priorities before they get to him. However, he is the franchise's lead star, their point guard of the future. And I think he'll have major influence on every other roster decision, but I just don't think he gets an extension yet. It's still a little bit too early. They can still assess how the next season goes, because who knows? This season could have been a fluke when it comes to injuries. I think they really figured out what to do to kind of keep him durable and healthy throughout the season. But if he gets hurt again, who knows what the team does with him, especially if it's another long-term injury, which is what he's been having the last few years. Overall, the Hornets offseason is really about balancing patience with ambition. Charlotte has finally built a competitive young core around LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller, Kobe White, and now Concanupple, and the front office must decide whether to aggressively add veteran talent and chase the playoffs now, or preserve flexibility for an even bigger move in the future. Either way, the expectation for this team has shifted from rebuilding to winning very quickly.